It's time for Lefties Losing It. You know, nature is healing. Things are getting better day by day, even as the demented Democrats call for Donald Trump to be impeached for a targeted strike against Iran's nuclear facilities. Still, the number of sane, rational folk is increasing. You know, things are looking up when a confirmed TDS sufferer like Charlemagne is belatedly seeing the light. Now, this is going to outrage his lefty audience. There'll be meltdowns galore because he's spitting facts.
There have been a bunch of presidents who have ordered strikes without congressional approval. Barack Obama did it against Libya. Joe Biden ordered strikes in Iraq and Syria without congressional approval. Bill Clinton did it to, was it Kosovo? I think you pronounce it. So presidents ordering military action without congressional approval has become pretty routine.
And he's not alone. Here's another Democrat, another lefty losing it. He used to rail against Trump. Well, he's now defending him. Stephen A. Smith is angry, not at the president, but at the Democrats and their calls for impeachment.
The Democrats are calling, or at least some of them, are calling for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Same old song and dance. Thought we heard this before. I thought that was over and done with. The minute you lost the election with the popular vote in the Electoral College vote and losing every sweep state. I thought we were over that. Question number one. No matter what you feel about the President of the United States, do you think that's the time, while we're in the middle of such strife, to be calling for the impeachment of the President of the United States? Particularly if you're a representative, you're an elected official in the United States of America? I don't think so. That's number one. Number two, were the Democrats saying that when Obama bombed Libya, when he was in office?
It's a new day, folks. I'll be playing you some crazy lefties soon. But right now, we are just reveling in lefties who are finally seeing the light.
This is eradicating a threat. Civilians weren't targeted. Nuclear sites were targeted. You can navigate your way around the War Powers Act itself, and you don't have to concern yourself with receiving congressional approval. The Democrats know that because of Obama. So if you knew that because of Obama and you didn't say it when it involved him in Libya, why would you turn around and all of a sudden try to make that case against Donald Trump?
Really, he's done my work for me, precisely the arguments I was going to make, and now I have to listen to a lifelong Democrat make it. I may lose it myself. Now, Trump has even got Democrat Senator John Fetterman, once a far-left radical, criticising AOC and her calls for Trump to be impeached.
She knows it. I know it. We all know it. That's not going anywhere. And, you know, he's been impeached twice, and now he's still our president as well now, too. So it's not going anywhere, and I don't think that's helpful. And I think if you throw that term around, that actually diminishes what the severity of what impeachment is really reserved for.
And here's more lefties getting an education. Old school lefty Bill Maher and his audience got a strong dose of logic from Republican Wesley Hunt about the importance of not tearing down Confederate statues and the importance of restoring the names of military bases. Listen to this.
Trump is putting the Robert E. Lee name back on buildings. I mean, are you down with that?
So when I was at West Point, I actually lived in Robert E. Lee barracks when I was there. And as I said,
Robert E. Lee went to West Point.
Yes, he did. That's why the barracks named after him. And so my brother, sister, and I are matriculated through West Point. We all graduated. And I'll never forget walking under the threshold of Robert E. Lee barracks and think to myself, damn, this is one hell of a country. Because only in America can someone like me walk into a building named after a Confederate general and then be a successful West Point graduate.
Yes.
And I do not want to take down these statues and change the names of these buildings because they're a reminder of what was. And if we don't remember it, we are doomed to repeat it.
Okay. Oh. So there's a reason for it, I see.
As if it's not bad enough that I have the likes of Charlemagne and Stephen A. Smith making my arguments for me, now here is Bill Maher poking fun at the dangerously dim-witted and delusional ladies of The View.
Whoopi Goldberg saying it's worse to be a black person in America today than a woman in Iran. You know, I see we were talking about the trans issue before, and the New York Times really has come over on that to the sort of the sensible, liberal, not crazy woke position. I think this is a great first step toward getting the Democrats back to sanity, and a second good step would be we got to do something about The View. really believe that. I mean, could you just
It's huge in Iran, though.
Stay in your lane, Bill Maher. Mocking lefties is my territory. You go back to, I don't know, smoking dope and poking fun at Christians. But I do want to play you this brilliant response to Whoopi's insane victim playing from Wesley Hunt. And note again the audience clapping. This is Bill Maher's audience. This wouldn't have happened a few years ago.
My district in the great state of Texas is actually a white majority district that President Trump would have won by 25 points. As I said, I'm a direct descendant of a slave. My great-great-grandfather was born on a Rosedale plantation. I am literally being judged not by the color of my skin, but by the content of my character. That's the progress because, like, a lot of white people had to vote for me. A lot.
So wait,
I don't even ever want to hear Whoopi Goldberg's conversation about how it's worse to be black in America right now. That's a bit far. And my father, who's 75 years old, he was a man that was in the French quarters that had to go get a sandwich to the back door of the building. And his son is now a United States congressman in a white majority district in Texas as a Republican. That is America. That's America.
And while we're talking about The View, let's check in on the lunacy. Here is Joy Behar.
So on Thursday, the White House said that Trump was going to make a decision on Iran within the next 2 weeks. That's what he said. Remember that? Okay. He was going to give diplomatic negotiations more time to play out. And then, less than 48 hours later, this attack was underway. So what changed? And what was he actually trying to accomplish here?
I mean, look, the 2 weeks measure was clearly a bit of a head fake.
So why did he keep it a secret? For the surprise, the surprise version?
I mean, absolutely the diversion, and you saw the way that all indications were the B-2s were flying towards Guam. Everybody thought, okay, so we're getting in position to be ready. They wanted to have some element of surprise.
Did she really ask why the US didn't tell the Iranians about the surprise attack? Lost for words. Here is Sunny Hostin on The View, pretending to be an international law expert, and she gets shut down quick smart.
He bypassed Congress, potentially violated the War Powers Resolution. I believe this is certainly a clear violation of international law, at the very least. Democratic House Leader Hakeem Jeffries accused the president of misleading the country as to his intentions. What do you think are the possible ramifications that President Trump could face for arguably overstepping his authority?
Well, look, constitutionally, only Congress has the power to declare war. The War Powers Act would make it seem very clear you need to have congressional approval on this. But president after president after president has launched military action without the approval of Congress.
Yeah.
Now, here is further proof that blue cities are mad and willing to elect ever more radical miscreants. New York's mayoral race is underway, and Zoran Mamdani, a socialist, the New York Post reports, has barely ever held a job and admits to being a Nepo baby. Well, he could be the next mayor. He could be the man to lead a city of 8.8 million people. This guy.
Down for you. Make a sound for you. Go ahead, make a rap for you, Nani. It's a rap. Get the glass in the rack on your Nani. In the rack. Come through, give a dab to your Nani. If you're really feeling good, spin a track for your Nani.
And more recently has been involved in violent protests against Tom Homan and the Trump administration's deportation program.
How many more New Yorkers have not died? Do you believe in the First Amendment? Do you believe in the First Amendment, Tom Homan? How many more New Yorkers have not died?
Joining me now is comedian and host of Prime Time with Alex Stein on Blaze TV. Alex, what is going on in New York? Will we have this 33-year-old become mayor?
You know, I hate to say it, Rita, but I think he is, possibly going to win. And I think New York kind of, they get what they deserve. And if they want to try radical socialism, go ahead and find out. I know California had some terrible fires because they didn't have, water to put out these fires. Lord have mercy if there's a terrible fire in New York City and they don't have water to put it out. So if they want to go this direction, that's why we live in a democracy. And if these people want to choose to go that route, buyer beware is all I can say when it comes to the citizens of New York City.
Well, I think we're going to see a new influx of New Yorkers moving to your state, Texas or Florida and Tennessee. We have seen that internally in the US for some time now. Californians and New Yorkers fleeing these blue states, going to red states like Texas and Florida, but sometimes they keep voting the same way, so it can be a bit of a danger. Now, Joe Biden or whoever was pulling his strings put this woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, on the Supreme Court. Remember this?
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
Yes, on the Supreme Court, but can't tell you what a woman is. But since becoming SCOTUS, we've seen that justice wowing us with theatrics, literally.
Like I hate it. Which makes me think it must be brilliant. Got this feeling in my body.
And ABC News reports that Justice Brown Jackson has unloaded on her Supreme Court colleagues in a series of sharp dissents, castigating them for what she called a pure textualism approach to interpreting the law. Yes, we can't really rely on the text, Alex. We've got to just go with the feelings and vibes, I guess.
You know, she is the DEI vibe Supreme Court justice, so I'm surprised that she doesn't want to have to look at words and go by, the laws that are written in a book. So I'm honestly not surprised because she can't define a simple question like, what is a woman? She can't say that there's many biological differences, when it comes to chromosomes or body parts. I mean, there's just so many differences between a man and a woman, and she wants to try to placate as if they're the same. So this is who's in power, and there's always going to be one of these DEI people that are there. And I think it's almost good in a way, so we can kind of weed out who is making the wrong decision in the Supreme Court. Sadly, I think they're going to have a job for life. Supreme Court justices don't go anywhere, so it stinks that she's going to have a job forever. But at least we know that she's kind of, the dumb one. So however she votes, we know the opposite of it is probably the way that we should be voting.
I would argue there's another one on that in that court that's even dumber, but we'll argue about that another day. But yeah, she's got some competition there, I can tell you. Sean Diddy Combs, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, he's not going to testify at his trial. The New York Post is reporting not only is Diddy not testifying, but his legal team isn't planning on calling a single witness in his defence. Alex, I'm not a lawyer, but this seems rather a risky approach.
Well, I'm not an attorney either, but I do think that they say that if you are, a criminal, it's better to not go on the stand so that you don't perjure yourself, or I guess that he doesn't, get caught up in some sort of web of lies by the prosecution. So maybe it is smart for him to not go on the stand, but let's be real, and I know this is an unpopular position to take. When it comes to this case and everything that I've heard so far, Puff Daddy might be the most repugnant human being in the world. But according to this case, everything seems to have been consensual. And it seems like there was a lot of money and baby oil and disgusting actions. But I think some people in this case need to take some sort of self-responsibility. So if Puff Daddy gets off from this court case, it's going to be like the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, he's going to be a hero, Rita, for all the wrong reasons. So I kind of hope that doesn't happen, but I also hope that, justice is served and that he doesn't go to jail unnecessarily if he didn't really commit the crime that they're accusing him of.
Well, we don't know what the jurors think of some of the footage they've seen because no one else has seen it. Federal prosecutors on Monday showed the jurors around 20 minutes of footage from these so-called freak-offs, and the videos were only viewed by the jury due to the very graphic nature. So I don't know. I mean, again, just because it's repugnant doesn't mean it's illegal. So, yeah, it will be fascinating to see the outcome of this case. Before you go, Alex, I know you're very sad because Pride Month is almost over. You've been very active throughout June. How close have you come to being arrested or perhaps being assaulted with some of your antics?
Well, Rita, June is a good month when it comes to clicks, but in reality, I'm ready for it to be over because, listen, I love my gay brothers and sisters, but do we need a whole month to just celebrate somebody's sexuality? I mean, come on, a week is long enough. So I'll be happy when this holiday is over. And unfortunately, I will say this, getting all these clicks and confronting drag queen story times, sadly, this stuff goes on even when it's not June. So just because June's ending doesn't mean that all of this weird indoctrination is going to stop.
Alex Stein, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Rita.
To America, and while the Democrats play the role of the Iranian mullahs, useful idiots, railing against the military action and calling for Donald Trump to be impeached, the president has been busy securing a ceasefire, what he calls a complete and total ceasefire. Let's hear more on that from Vice President J.D. Vance.
What it means, Brett, is quite simple. First of all, the president, without, knock on wood, having a single American casualty, obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. We are now in a place where we weren't a week ago. A week ago, Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. So that's a very, very big thing. Now, what that means, I think, is we have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds. Because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here, is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people, most importantly, can be secured, but where we can ensure that the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program that has already happened is not something they try to rebuild.
And on that ceasefire, earlier today, Donald Trump announced the end of what he called the 12-day war. He wrote, "Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. On the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will." Let's bring in Sky News contributor Kosha Gada. Kosha, what are the chances that this ceasefire will hold? I'm surprised it's been agreed to in the first place, but will it be lasting?
That is $1 million question on everybody's mind. What a whirlwind 72 hours this has been, from that first bombing to where we are now, and the ceasefire on the table, allegedly. The split in the Trump base that I think is healing, but the side that was very strongly opposed to this is for that reason, that how can we trust this will work? What are going to be the seen and unseen consequences down the road? However, just as Vice President Vance said over there, they don't have much to come back from, the Iranians, so it feels difficult to see that they're going to engage in this kind of kinetic back and forth, because they're pretty much depleted in terms of their leadership, in terms of their missiles and everything else. Could they do other things like sleeper cells and things like that over the long term? Possibly. That is still a worry. But as of now, I think we're sitting in a pretty good place where their nuclear capability has been annihilated, their leadership is gone, boots on the ground gone, other long-range missiles depleted. And conversely, we don't have American troops on the ground. We're not getting sucked into forever wars. We're not going into this regime change fantasy, which many were pushing as well. So he seems to have threaded the needle quite well.
Well, that seems to be a critical point, isn't it? It's one thing to have these stealth bombers with their secret mission, but to have boots on the ground is, I think, something that many Americans from both sides of politics would be dead set against.
100%. And Trump was. That's the thing that gave some people pause or concern, that though he doesn't want that, there is something called incrementalism, and you take one action, does it lead to the slippery slope? But he is very strongly against that. The American people are very weary after 25 years of a failed adventure in the Middle East to little to no avail, and I think that's dead on arrival.
Now, what do you make of the manner in which the Australian government has handled this matter? Anthony Albanese has belatedly expressed support for Donald Trump's strikes on Iran's nuclear program, but that came after Foreign Minister Penny Wong called for de-escalation before the strikes. It's all very confusing. I don't know how that can be very supportive when just before the strikes they were calling for de-escalation. Does this isolate us a little bit more? That surely the US and Israel can't be particularly happy with Australia at this point.
When I look at the timing and manner of the statements that are coming out of the Albanese administration, it just comes across as playing it very, very safe, very focused grouped almost when they're looking at different factions in their party back home. And this was a controversial move. There's no question. And by and large, we all wanted to prevent escalation. So I understand where they're coming from with having some of those statements out there. But the way they come across is just too safe, too little, too much junior varsity and not playing in the big leagues or representing Australia kind of at the big boys table. It sort of looks like they're at the kids table.
It seems very much amateur hour sort of antics. It's not something where their statements seem to be useful to the country. Surely what we want to be doing, if we want to have any sort of input, would be to be in a better position at the end of this operation than beforehand. And I think we've just given the Americans more reason to doubt where we stand, especially given the reluctance to increase defence spending as has been requested by the Trump administration.
Reluctance to do that, the optics of being snubbed at the G7, not grabbing the bull by the horns and getting a White House meeting in the Oval Office already.
And not even getting a meeting with the Vice President. I think Anthony Albanese, there was a massive misstep to think that I'm the leader of the country, I must meet the leader of the US and bypass JD Vance.
Right, and not grabbing that opportunity when he had it. So at The Hague, supposedly Richard Marles is going to meet potentially with President Trump, but we shall see.
Now, back to the US, and Attorney General Pam Bondi was asked about how many Iranian sleeper cells may be in the US right now.
How many Iranian sleeper cells do we suspect are in the United States?
Congressman, I can't talk about that in this setting, but what I can tell you is I know Homeland Security, I know the FBI. They are focusing on doing everything we can to keep our nation safe. There is not a day that goes by that we don't discuss the issues that you just brought up with me at the Department of Justice, but I also know that our counterparts at DOD, HSI, the State Department, and all of our agencies are working together to make America safe and, in turn, keep our world safe.
Kosha, she also said there that it was a particularly dangerous period for the US. Of course, we saw millions coming across that southern border under the Biden administration, no checks, no controls. So really, how could they have any idea how many sleeper cells there could be in the country?
And they probably don't. And this is back to what we were talking about earlier, that with this action, you cannot predict every consequence, and we will probably never know every consequence that's going to come out of it. And these kinds of ones, you know, the overt ones, like the missiles that were striking and intercepted by the U.S. military, that was a great showing of the might of American military, offensively and defensively. But things like this, it is harder to predict, and it further underscores the Trump administration's #1 agenda, and really what undergirded his whole rise politically, is immigration, securing the border, deporting illegals. And that is a problem, that we've got anywhere from 30, 40, 50 million. Nobody knows the number of illegals in the country. About 10 to 12 were allowed just in the last 4 years under Joe Biden. Tens of thousands of them potentially Iranians. Many may very well be sympathetic to the regime and not very happy right now. So this is a big problem. It is concerning, and hopefully this gives them some more ammunition, rhetorically speaking, to really deport those people aggressively and fight back against all the opposition they're facing internally.
How will the Democrats handle this escalation? Will they carry water for Iran's Islamist regime, for the mad mullahs? We've heard a lot of claims from the Democrats that the strikes were unconstitutional, against international law. We've got the likes of AOC and Hakeem Jeffries calling for impeachment. They really are getting on the front foot with this. But again, I wonder whether this is going to be counterproductive for them.
I think so, and they feel really scattered. There's like 15 different messages that have come out of the Democrat Party. You had John Fetterman of Pennsylvania very, very much in favor of it. You have these guys calling for impeachment. Impeachment is their favorite tool of choice against Trump. They did it twice over the perfect phone call, quote unquote, and the insurrection that didn't rise to the legal standard of insurrection. So
have they learnt from that, or do they still know that the more radical elements of their supporter base get excited when they hear the I word, and they are just going to keep going down that road, even if it just makes them even more unelectable?
I think it seems to be the latter. They just don't have the votes right now. But if they were to gain back the majority in the midterms, which is possible because Republicans have a very slim majority, absolutely, I think they're going to find the first cause they can cook up to do it. And that's another reason why Trump really has to act fast, because who knows how much time he has left if they were to do this.
Well, it's going to be fascinating what they come up with. Cook up, I think, was the perfect term there. Now to other news. The FBI has launched investigations into who is funding and organising violent protests in the US, what NGOs, individuals are behind the lawlessness we saw in LA and other cities. They can expect to feel the full force of the law. Let's hear from Bill Asali, along with FBI Assistant Director Akil Davis and IRS Special Agent Tyler Hatcher.
These violent agitators put peaceful demonstrators at risk.
The FBI and our federal partners will continue to investigate individuals and organizations who are knowingly funding and committing acts of violence against law enforcement, as well as the destruction of property.
We are currently tracing money to determine who is providing funding for these riots. Funding crime doesn't just affect the criminals, it also disrupts entire communities. Each dollar funneled into illegal operations fuels violence, undermines law and order, and perpetuates fear. Make no mistake, we will identify and disrupt financial networks supporting these criminal activities.
This is potentially huge. There are some very rich, very influential characters behind some of these NGOs that are suspected of aiding and abetting the rioters. And again, this is something that the Trump base is very energised about.
This is potentially huge. That old adage, follow the money, rings very true here. If you choke off the money supply, a lot of these so-called protests that are probably not 100% organic, I think a lot of people doubt that they are, do get severed. It won't be easy because the likes of George Soros' name comes up and other very powerful people who are going to lawyer up. They're going to have judges in their corner that are going to try and stymie this every step of the way. So it's not going to be easy, but it does show the power of a full-throated approach by the government. All agencies, the IRS, they know everything about your money, the FBI, the DOD, Homeland Security, Pam Bondi, and the Justice Department, everybody kind of coming together for the singular goal of getting these people out and those who aid and abet them admonished.
Now, before you go, if you were advising the Australian government, which has now got a relationship with our biggest ally, the US, that isn't the strongest it's been, we've had the Prime Minister snubbed repeatedly, how would you look to repair that relationship? How do you, because we have the trade tariffs to negotiate, we have AUKUS, we've got the defence spending. It's a really critical time, and Albanese needs to get some face time with the president.
I think, being very clear about Australia first, like what is the actual policy agenda that puts Australia first, and understanding that. Sometimes that gets complicated as well when you're dealing with this tenuous coalition of different people from the Greens all the way to the centrists, so figuring that out. And then secondly, in terms of dealing with the US, Trump is very much a people person at the end of the day, and that old-fashioned approach of building a relationship, finding somebody who has likability with him and his team, and pushing on that.
It doesn't look like that's going to be Kevin Rudd. It looks like the ambassador is an impediment, not a help at this point. Do they have to make a call on that? Because this relationship has...
it's tainted.
It's
potentially beyond repair.
It's as weak as it's been in several decades.
And he doesn't seem to be pulling away from that. Albanese seems to be backing Kevin Rudd in that role. But I would have to imagine, I don't think Trump is really spending too much time thinking about Australia right now. But if he were, and if he said, I can't work with this guy, send me somebody else, I'm pretty sure that would happen.
Kosha Gada, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.